Our heroes have tracked the bandits to their hideout, an abandoned mine a few miles outside of town. After carefully scouting around, they find only a few bandits guarding the entrance. They quietly get into position, wait for the signal, and then unleash hell. On today's D&D Academy, we're going to be charging headfirst into danger with combat. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are 3 tiers of play that form the structure of the game. These pillars of the game are the exploration tier, the social tier, and the combat tier. In the exploration and social aspects of play, the rules of the game are a loose framework that enables the story to unfold as the Dungeon Master narrates the events. The DM describes events that can take place over minutes, hours, even days. However, once combat begins, the flow of time in the game becomes rigidly structured and a precise set of rules takes over. In this video, we're going to cover the structure of combat in D&D. Our next 2 videos will cover the specifics in greater detail, but for today, we're doing an overview of combat as a whole. Combat is the most rules-intensive aspect of the game, and so I think it's important to cover it one step at a time. The game organizes the chaos of combat into a cycle of rounds and turns. An entire round represents about 6 seconds in the game world. During a round, each participant in a battle takes 1 turn. The order of turns is determined at the beginning of a combat encounter when everyone rolls what is called initiative. Once everyone has taken a turn, the fight continues to the next round if neither side has defeated the other. Combat always follows the same 4 steps: surprise, position, initiative, and rounds. The first 3 steps are completed in order, and then the final step continues over and over until combat is finished. Before we break down the steps of combat, let's define some terms and talk about what you can do on a turn first. On your turn, there are 2 things you always get to do, and they are move and take 1 action. You can move and then take your action. You can take your action and then move, or you can move a bit, take your action, and then continue moving. In our next videos, we will cover actions and movement in combat in much greater detail, as it warrants a whole discussion all on its own. There are 2 other things you could do in combat. On your turn, you can also take 1 bonus action. You can take a bonus action only when a special ability, spell, or other feature of the game states that you can do something as a bonus action. You otherwise don't have a bonus action to take. You can only take 1 bonus action on your turn, so you must choose which bonus action to use when you have more than 1 available. You choose when to take a bonus action during your turn, unless the bonus action's timing is specified. Also important to note is that anything that deprives you of your ability to take actions also prevents you from taking any bonus actions. Certain special abilities, spells, and situations can also allow you to take a special action called a reaction. A reaction is an instant response to a trigger of some kind which can occur on your turn or someone else's. Reactions are special in this way. Moving, actions, and bonus actions only occur on your turn. A reaction can be taken at any time on any turn if a specific trigger occurs. When you take a reaction, you can't take another until the start of your next turn. If the reaction interrupts another creature's turn, that creature continues its turn right after the reaction. Your turn can also include a variety of flourishes that require neither your action nor your move. You can communicate however you are able through brief utterances and gestures as you take your turn. You can also interact with 1 object or feature of the environment for free during either your move or your action. For example, you could open a door during your move as you strive towards a foe, or you could draw your weapon as part of the same action you use to attack. If you want to interact with a second object, however, you need to use your action. Some magic items and other special objects always require an action to use, as stated in their descriptions. The DM might require you to use an action for any of these activities when it needs special care or when it presents an unusual obstacle. For instance, the DM could reasonably expect you to use an action to open a stuck door or to turn a crank to lower a drawbridge. Now that we've defined the actions of a turn, let's now go over the flow of combat as a whole. The first step of combat is determine surprise. The heroes have set up an ambush for a goblin patrol by hiding in the trees, and as the patrol passes beneath them, they launch into their attack. Or the heroes, occupied by a locked chest and the promises of riches within, don't realize the gelatinous cube has stealthily crept up behind them until it engulfs one of them. In these situations, one side of the battle gains surprise over the other. The DM determines who might be surprised. If neither side tries to be stealthy, they automatically notice each other. Otherwise, the DM compares the dexterity stealth checks of anyone hiding with the passive wisdom perception score of each creature on the opposing side. Any creature or monster that does not notice a threat is surprised at the start of the encounter. If you're surprised, you can't move or take an action on your first turn of the combat, and you can't take a reaction until the end of that turn. A member of a group could be surprised even if the other members aren't. The next step of combat is establish positions. The DM decides where all the creatures and monsters are located. Given the adventurer's marching order, or their stated positions in the room or other location, the DM figures out where the adversaries are, how far away, and in what direction. The third step in combat is to roll initiative. Initiative determines the order of turns during combat. When combat starts, every participant makes a dexterity check to determine their place in the initiative order. The DM makes one roll for an entire group of identical creatures, so each member of the group acts at the same time. The DM ranks the combatants in order from the one with the highest dexterity check total to the one with the lowest. This is the order, called the initiative order, in which they act during each round. The initiative order remains the same from round to round. If a tie occurs, the DM decides the order among tied DM-controlled creatures, and the players decide the order amongst their tied characters. The DM can decide the order if the tie is between a monster and a player character. Optionally, the DM can have the tied characters and monsters each roll a d20 to determine the order, highest roll going first. Another option to the DM is to individually roll initiative for each adversary. This is a little more time-consuming and more work for the DM, but it can bring a bit of realism to the combat. Finally, in the combat steps, the first round starts. Using the initiative order, each PC and monster takes one turn until everyone has taken their turn in the initiative order, and then the round ends, and the next round begins at the top of the initiative order. Remember that if you are surprised, you cannot take actions or move on your first turn. This continues until one side is defeated and the combat ends. Once combat ends, the strict order of turns is no longer followed, and the in-game time once again becomes controlled by the DM's narration. Now, while this covers the overview of combat, we've only just scratched the surface. In our next few videos, we'll cover movement and actions in combat, discussing what you can do on a turn in much greater detail. After that, we'll cover damage and healing, special combat rules, and finish our combat mini-series by discussing resting. Thank you for joining me here today down in the dungeon, and if you've been enjoying this series, why not hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video from us here at House of Crit. I'll be back next Wednesday with another D&D Academy video, so I'm looking forward to seeing you all then. See you soon.